I have a very personal feeling about our guest of honor and his wife. We're lucky to have them with us. He represents all that's the greatest that this country has to offer, in my humble estimation. And I've seen a few years of great and near great people. The general has occupied the greatest positions of responsibility over the years that this country can offer. He is now, as you well know, in charge of the Strategic Air Command, which for years has been the umbrella and the shield that has kept us relatively on a par with the Russians militarily. They are guarding our frontiers in the air, and I had the unique opportunity in September of spending a few days with some other gentlemen at Omaha at the invitation of General Chang, and it was most revealing and educational to see the thoroughness and the fantastic ability that we have to stay where we are on top of the world, paralleling the Russians. General, just to mention a few things, in addition to all of his command experience, has built up 4,000 hours of flying time, 400 hours of which have been in combat, actual combat. And I think he's the only general that is licensed to fly every aircraft that the Pentagon has under their control. One of his real responsibilities is to get across to the people of the United States the fantastic job that the Strategic Air Command handles for us, the citizens of this country. We in Baltimore are obviously very vulnerable to attack from any side because of the port and the great shipping and business facilities that we have here. So rather than spend more time lauding him, I want you to listen to his story, which is one of the most scintillating and fascinating experiences that I'm sure you will have. And with that, I introduce to you General John Chang.
See if this will pull out a little bit. Thank you, Fife, for the warm introduction, and also thank you very much for leaving my speech on the podium there. I was in doubt there for a moment or two. But it's a delight to be here with all of you tonight. I feel very strongly about groups like this. I'm a member of the Council in New York. I don't get there as often as I would like to, but this is democracy in action. And I couldn't be more pleased to be invited to speak with you tonight. And I particularly look forward to the question and answer period because I want to be able to address the things that are on your mind and not just talk at you about things that are on my mind. But like any speaker who is speaking to a distinguished group like this, I am concerned about how my remarks might go over tonight. And I'm reminded of a story about Adlai Stevenson, who found himself in the same similar position, and where he delivered an important address, and afterwards a elderly, very earnest lady came up to him and said, "Oh, Mr. Stevenson, I enjoyed your speech so much, I found it absolutely superfluous." And Adlai Stevenson was shaken, but only for a moment, and he quickly responded, "I'm delighted that you liked it. I plan to have it published posthumously." And with that, the lady said, "Oh, wonderful, and the sooner the better." So I've entitled my remarks this evening, "Preserving the Long Peace." And the title, "The Long Peace," is taken from an article by John Gaddis, who is a distinguished professor of history at Ohio University. And in his article, Professor Gaddis noted that there are several generally accepted times and periods in the world where the world has experienced relative late peace, which are between 1815 and 1853 and 1871 to 1914, and then from 1945 to the present. So that puts us, in historical terms, into the longest period of peace that the civilized world has ever experienced. Now, Professor Gaddis noted that the long peace and the current peace that we are in can be dispensed with, the reason for it can be dispensed with fairly quickly, in that the United States emerged from World War II. And I met men tonight who fought in that war, and we emerged from that war as the world's preeminent economic as well as military power. And our nation's strengths are determined by many factors: the vigor of our economy and the quality of our political instrument and the effectiveness of our diplomacy and our character as a nation and our will and our morale. However, in a world where force or the threat of force remains the final arbiter of international affairs, ultimately, history has reflected that it has been the strength and the capabilities of armed forces and the willingness of our nation to maintain a level of strength which has restrained adversaries. And these factors have been the cornerstone of our successful effort to preserve the peace. And we've done that successfully now for more than 40 years. So I find it a bit ironic when Americans find ourselves strong, that we are thought by some to no longer need to be strong because we are at peace. And that premise, I would argue, is false and deluding. Our nation interacts in an international environment which is very unsettled, and we have an adversary who is very well armed. And I know we have some people here tonight from NSA, and all American intelligence services will tell you that in spite of glasnost and summits, there is absolutely no indication that the Soviet Union has slowed down their build. And it is in this environment that the renewed strength of the United States, that I believe in a substantial way has brought the Soviets to the bargaining table. Several years ago, I was in the State Department as an Assistant Secretary of State, wearing civilian clothes, running the Bureau of Political Military Affairs, which is the bureau in the State Department primary for arms control. I worked for George Shultz. And Mike Littman, who negotiated the INF Treaty, worked for me in that capacity. I personally don't believe we would have an INF treaty today, whether you agree with it or not, but I don't believe we would have had that if the United States hadn't been strong. I feel the same thing is true about the START agreement, that we would not be negotiating in good faith if we weren't negotiating from a position of power. Because those who challenge us are not deterred by rhetoric, nor are they deterred by the potential of our economic capabilities. It is only by the existing and visible capability of operational forces to respond to any level of threat or coercion or an attack anywhere or any time that counts in the equation. We must maintain our strength, and we must do that with patience, which is not a virtue that Americans are known for, perseverance and fortitude over the long haul, because it is not a short or a one-time commitment. It has to be a forever commitment. So let me tell you a little bit about some young, bright, wonderful Americans who have that commitment. And the men and women in the Strategic Air Command. We have 135,000 people in SAC. About 108,000 of them are active duty. Another 15,000 are guardsmen and reservists, who I strongly applaud because they do not need to do that on the weekends. They give up their time away from their family to do that type of duty, and I'm very proud of them. And in SAC, they're primarily associated with our refueling capability. And we have 13,000 civilians in SAC. And collectively, they form a team. And I don't differentiate between the active, the guard, the reserves, or the civilian. It's the most professional force that I've seen in the 32 years that I've been in the Air Force. And our mission in SAC is very clear. It is to deter war. And I don't believe there's any more responsible mission or more important mission. And we in SAC are very proud to have that responsibility. And to do that mission, I have a little more than 2,000 weapon systems. We have 367 bombers, and that number is increasing. I have 651 airborne tankers, the flying airplane that gives gas to the bombers and other fighters in the air, and that number is growing. I have 55 reconnaissance aircraft, and that number is growing, and we have about 1,000 intercontinental ballistic missiles, and that number also is growing. Now, we've done a lot through the years to try to squeeze all the combat capability possible out of the resources that you have entrusted us with. I'll give you a few examples. Our Minuteman missile, which is an intercontinental ballistic missile which has been in the ground for over 25 years, today is 40% more accurate than the original Minuteman. I was out in California last week where we had a test flight of one of those missiles and sent 3 reentry vehicles downrange, some 5,000 miles. And I can't give you the accuracy, but I can tell you as SINGSAC, I was very pleased. We are taking those aerial tankers that I mentioned a few moments ago, and we're putting new engines on it. Now, we're talking about an airplane that's 25 years old. And by putting new engines on it, I have the offload capability 1.5 times of the original version. And this 25-year-old aircraft is going to serve you and us to the year 2040. some of us won't be around to see the last one phase out. So what I'm telling you is we are trying desperately to make sure we get everything that we can out of what we already have. And in a few moments, I'm going to tell you about the B-52, which also is an older aircraft, and how we're trying to preserve it. But as time passes, it is only logical and it's necessary that we continue to deploy new and modern weapons. Because, like it or not, the Soviets continue to enhance their capabilities, and that is what I have to measure my capabilities against. And we've been working very hard to modernize the Strategic Air Command. And we need to do that if we're going to fulfill our primary responsibility of deterrence. Now, one of the weapon systems that we have brought in recently is the B-1 bomber. We've got the 100th B-1 delivered to SAC in April, 2 months ahead of schedule. Now, I can tell you that in spite of some of the things that you have read and been exposed to that are flagrant violations of good, honest journalism, the B-1 is a fantastic weapon system. We fly it at 200 feet, at 600 miles an hour, day, night, and in the weather. It has a radar cross-section when an enemy radar tries to find it, 1/100th of the size of a B-52. And if any of you in this room have any fighter background, I can tell you that the B-1 has a smaller radar cross-section than does a modern-day fighter. Critics say that the airplane weighs too much, General. I said, oh, really? The A model, which was the early version, we added 8,000 pounds of structural buildup on that aircraft, fixing the landing gear so it could hold more weight. And with that 8,000-pound investment, this added weight, I'm able to put on 25,000 pounds more gas and 50,000 pounds more bombs on one airplane. So does it weigh more? You're damn right it does. Do I want it to weigh more? You better believe it, because we have been able to enhance that aircraft's capability, and what's the critics say? It weighs too much. Bah. It's the right airplane at the right time, and if you want to talk to the real experts, go talk to the men that if we went to war today, that would take it there, and ask them what they would want to go to war in. I'll tell you the answer, it's the B-1. We've got a problem with that airplane, in that the company that we contracted with to build the defensive systems, the electronic countermeasure systems, didn't do it very well, so we've held up money from them. They're not going to get paid until they fix it, and they haven't done it right. And that makes me mad, but even without that, it's the best penetrating bomber in the world today, and when they fix that, it will even be better. Now let me shift gears for a moment and talk to you about the intercontinental ballistic missiles. As I said, we've had Minutemen on alert for some 25 years now. And to be able to ensure the continuing effectiveness of our intercontinental ballistic force, we need to upgrade those systems. And we are with a new weapon, used to be referred to as the MX, now is referred to as the Peacekeeper. We have a commitment to put 50 Peacekeepers on alert by December. We are on the ramp that I want to be on, and in December I will have 50 Peacekeepers on alert. And each Peacekeeper has 10 independently targeted warheads. We've test fired that missile 17 times. Some would have you believe that it's not very accurate. One self-styled analyst, defense expert, testified that it has just as much chance of hitting Washington as it does Moscow. I find that fascinating because in the 17 test flights, every one of them have been a complete success. We asked for a weapon to be able to hit within 450 feet of its target. And although I can't give you, because of the classification, the accuracy, I can tell you it's significantly better than what we asked for. All 17. So if you don't think I'm pleased with a peacekeeper, then you're talking to the wrong boy. Our game plan for the peacekeeper is to put the second 50 weapons on trains. We want to put that train on military bases behind fences, just the way we have the bombers and the tankers today. They would stay on those bases until, and hopefully the position would never happen, but until an adversary looked like it was going to attack the United States with nuclear weapons, at which time we could deploy these trains off those bases and have them dispersed over the 120,000 miles of usable railroad track in this country and blended in with the 1,500,000 railroad cars and the 3,000 train movements a day. And these trains will not be painted white with a sack stripe down the side. They will be old and rusty and dirty and say B&O, Chesapeake and Ohio and Union Pacific, and a cosmopolitan blend like you see go through your railroad yards every day, and no Soviet planner could ever find them. That would not enhance our offensive capability, but it would enhance stability, because once they moved off those garrisons and without being able to be found, the enemy couldn't target them, and therefore they would be survivable and would add to stability during any crisis period. Now, the remainder part of the strategic modernization program is also going well. We're getting a new bomber called the stealth bomber. Some of you have recently seen a picture of it in the paper. The good news is you've gotten to see a picture of it, and it is an accurate picture because I've visited the airplane. The bad news is the Air Force is being sued by the model company that put out a model of what they thought the stealth bomber was going to be. But I think that the stealth bomber, because of not being able to be seen by radar, will be to regular airplanes as the jet engine has been to propeller-driven airplanes, revolutionizing the warplane business. I visited the factory several times, I've flown the simulator, and it is going to serve our country very, very well. Now, what I've been talking about so far, obviously, has been nuclear weapons, nuclear deterrence, because that is our primary responsibility. And nuclear deterrence is absolutely essential for a long peace. But the country also needs strong conventional capability to reduce the likelihood that any conventional war would spill over into a nuclear conflict. Before going to SAC, I was the Chief of Staff at the Supreme Headquarters, Allied Powers Europe. That's NATO. It's a long title, but that's NATO when you think of NATO military forces. And the strategy that we as Americans and the other 15 NATO countries have signed up to is that we will fight as long as we can conventionally. But if that doesn't work, we use theater nuclear weapons. And the INF Treaty just negotiated away the theater nuclear weapon. And if that doesn't work, then we use strategic nuclear weapons, and I'm not interested in going to nuclear war. So the solution to the problem is to get a better balance between NATO and the Warsaw Pact in the conventional arms. Now, you can do that one or two ways. You can get the other side to come down. They have about 55,000 tanks to our 22,000 tanks, and I could go on and on. And it would be nice if they would do that. Unfortunately, we've had mutual balance force reductions, arms control talks going on for 15 years now. And they never yield as long as you sit passive. So the other way to get balance and then perhaps put some teeth in the arms control is to enhance your conventional capability. So when I went to SAC, one of the things that I looked at was what could we do to help on the conventional side. And we have the old, venerable B-52. It's been in the inventory a long time. The aircraft we have are not the ones that were rolled off the production line in the late 50s and early 60s. We're out there getting ready to go fly tonight through the mountains in Colorado and Utah at 200 feet wearing night vision goggles, practicing how they would conduct conventional types of attack. The whole command is in training for that type of warfare to be able to enhance the conventional deterrence as well as the nuclear deterrence. So tonight I tried to do is to give you a broad brush of some of the things that our people are doing now in SAC. However, I have a continuing concern, and that is our prospect for the future is not as glowing as our recent history, because we face severe budget crunch. And the budget cuts are, in fact, hurting. And I can tell you, we cannot do more with less. We are going to do less with less. I went back a couple of months ago to the Pentagon, and we carved $10 billion out of the budget that's going to start on 1 October, which is from a $94 billion budget. And when you take our budget and see the people programs and the investments, there isn't very much cushion to try to take those types of monies from. And then I went back and participated in a meeting where we took $20 billion out of the budget for the next 5 years, each year for the next 5 years. So the good news things that I've been talking to you about tonight are things that are going to soon dry up. The country needs a weapon very similar to what the Soviets have, and it's called a small ICBM. We're not going to be able to afford that. I have an airplane in our inventory now called the SR-71. It's an airplane that flies at over 80,000 feet and more than 3 times the speed of sound. And if we need a picture somewhere in the world, perhaps Libya, perhaps the Persian Gulf, perhaps any place else that there's a hot spot, my airplane can go there. But I can't afford to keep it because we aren't going to have enough money in the budget, so we're going to take that airplane out of our inventory. So if the President or the Secretary of Defense needs a picture, I'm going to have to say, sorry, Coach, it's not going to be available. And I could go on and on. We took 20,000 people out of our Air Force this year. And it was sort of handing them a pink slip and say, out the door, because we can't pay you. And without those people, then I can't operate these machines that you've entrusted with me. So when you just see the numbers of what we have, without the people that go with them, we're not going to have the capability that we should. We in the military recognize the legitimate concerns of our population at large, because we too are citizens and we too have the same feelings as the rest of the citizens. But we also live daily with the knowledge that welfare and health and education and democracy itself are fragile entities of those who live in unprotected societies. And in the long term, America is going to get the quality military establishment that it deserves, because that is the choice of the American people. And you make that choice through your elected representatives, because they are the ones who make the decisions of where the dollars go. And that's one of the reasons I'm so pleased to be here tonight, because this country needs a strong and informed citizenry that understand the fundamental differences between people who wish to have peace and yet not wanting to underwrite it, and people who understand that peace does come through strength. So we need people like you listening and learning and criticizing and supporting and speaking out on either side of the issue, but involvement. Because to me, that is one of the great strengths of our democracy. And through your diligence and people like you through this country, we've been able to have and give our people the longest period of peace that this world has ever known. And with your understanding and support, we will be able to continue to do that and maintain it through the years ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General. I think I've never seen a more enthusiastic audience, and I know it's well-deserved. I think we've had a great evening, and we owe tremendous thanks to General Chain for being with us, and we're just damn lucky to have him where he is, and I wish him, from all of you and us, the very best of luck.